This. This.
Our land, our identity, our future. What is it that we want? What are the objectives? What is this cause seeking to achieve? Number one, formal recognition as indigenous people of Belize. Number two, protection of ancestral lands and cultural heritage. Three, and I think this is the implementation part that is most important, the creation of Garifuna National Development Fund. And four, integration into national policy and identity. I dare say that point number four, I think the community as a whole and this group, the National Garifuna Committee of Belize, has been very, very successful in integrating the culture and the concept into Belizean identity. I don't think there's any Belizean child that didn't grow up and don't know these things about the culture. What it needs to tie into now is national policy, meaning implementation of programs that benefit these Garifuna communities. And we use the concept of Garifuna communities. I was speaking to somebody just today, earlier, and we said the concept of Garifuna communities, but it ties in with nation building because if you live in Dalriga, if you live in Punta Gorda, if you live in Hopkins, St. Vibe, you will know that there are other cultures as well there. So it's for the greater nation building of belief that the lobbying portion of it with government is so fundamental and so important. It's the bringing together of the tapestry that is beliefs. And I think that is the concept that would resonate the most and differentiate the Garifuna cause from that of the Maya cause, quite frankly. So we know that the legal basis and historical justification, this is not new information, particularly to those of us that study history, right? So the de facto recognition, we know and we celebrate the 19th of November. We know the history of the Garifuna people in Belize, but there is no particular legal structure, no legal framework, no legal designation. UNESCO designated the culture, the Garifuna culture, bestowed it with a special honor, right? But that has not necessarily been translated into domestic law. Now, when it comes to Commonwealth countries, international law needs a translation to be implemented domestically. Now, I know that the Council has considered in the past bringing a Supreme Court claim. It's a double-edged sword. Why? Because governments are particularly sensitive, particularly against uh, court claims, right? And we know that they're particularly sensitive right now. There's a lot going on politically. I think that it would be prudent to call them to task first and say, listen, this is something that we have always had in Belize. This is something that you have always de facto recognized. You do it in practice. Now it's time for the special designation to be legalized, to be put into legislation. What would that look like? That would look like literally an act of parliament, but that would be literally a designation by cabinet. So I don't mean to be naive or simplistic, but I don't see this being a very hard fight legally. This should be something that is a matter of drafting legislation, getting the representative for this constituency to push in cabinet, lobbying, writing in. Of course, you have to write. putting the concept note to cabinet. Maybe they ask for presentation, maybe they ask for um, collaboration with a particular ministry. But I feel like this is the number one first step legally that will lead to the path. And I feel like this is the low-lying fruit. You start with the easier one, and then we start to climb up the tree. So I feel like that is not out of the reach. Maybe even for this year, dare I say, if the meetings with government go well, maybe it's something that the government, it can be put to the government as a positive political move for them as well. They can get mileage out of it, they can get credit out of it, and this would be something wonderful to announce. Even if the legislation is not ready for this year, it would be something wonderful for government to announce for November celebrations this year. Governments, when it comes to lobbying for legislation, will always say, we are doing it, yes, but make a wait. But I think it's very important for us to stay on them and call them to task and say, put something in writing, make one announcement. Because there can't be backpedaling from that. And there's no denying the de facto recognition. We all know it, we are Belizeans, we live here. We've seen the UNESCO designation that exists in international law, so that is a firm foothold to put our legal framework and start from that point. And of course, we know the historical data as well. So we all know the historical data since 1797, that's pre-colonial Belize. Belize was officially designated a crown colony in 1862. We know that Barranco has written records from at least as early as 1802. So there is no question in terms of the context, the historical context, right? Furthermore, there are other international instruments through the UN, through the OAS that Belize is a party to. So the most important, significant one, particularly that the Maya land rights case rests on as well, is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Well, Belize signed on to that in 2007. What is more, and which I was a part of as well at the OAS, is the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People 2016, which again, we all are a party to that. So it's a matter of domesticating that legislation now through an act of parliament. And then we also have the established case of the CCJ, which right now is still the highest court in the land, of a designation and recognition of Maya people in Belize. So that process is already underway. So it would again be very prudent, be very progressive to piggyback on that initiative. And then, of course, there is a Memorandum of Understanding from 1999. So it's not a matter of moving backwards or bringing something very revolutionary. I think it's a natural progression that we are now. And then this just summarizes exactly what I was saying right now, but in very shorter words. And I'll share this PowerPoint presentation, and we can provide handouts if anybody wants to. So this is a little bit smaller, but as I was saying, the policy, the framework, the legal framework objective would be a National Garifuna Recognition Act, which would be an act of parliament. There would be a declaration by cabinet acknowledging Garifuna indigenous to Belize. That is the objective, that's what you want. But if cabinet makes a declaration, that's actually a legal statement that can be taken as a legal basis for an act to be drafted, instructions to be sent to the pertinent ministry. And then what the important exercise on the ground would be is the traditional land protection. So just as there was the mapping for the Maya land tenure, there needs to be a mapping. There is terribly deficient village boundary designation in this country. There's so few villages in this country that have officially set gazetted boundaries, and now it's coming back to haunt us. So that exercise would be extremely important. Um, and then, of course, we move on to the Garifuna National Development Fund. This is important because of all these point one and point two things that we want to do. We want to draft legislation, we want to make special designation, we want to do mapping, we want to do designation of villages and boundaries, we want to use surveyor and outline a thing. And the first thing government wants to know how we have to, right? It sounds lovely, but how are we going to pay for it? That's why the designation of the development fund is so important. And that's why the cultural significance of and historical significance in Belize of all the villages has to be legalized, because that will give us access not only to domestic funding but to international funding. So, what is more, can we and this is the litigation pathway that we mentioned in the beginning, bringing a Supreme Court case as opposed to finding other ways to make it more palatable for government. Help us to help you. What I want to flip to now is the special designation of the villages, the historical, but I think I have a slide for that. So I talked about UNESCO designation, and UNESCO has designated the Garifuna culture to be unique in the world, special, worth preserving. So that designation is recognized. UNESCO also does special designations of World Heritage Sites or other things of importance, like our Blue Hole in Belize. The country of Mexico has adopted that for their domestic purposes, has taken that and has designated individual villages in their country. They're called pueblos mágicos, and they put in legislation in their country to protect those places, right? So they have a path for the revolution, the Mexican Revolution, that they had meetings and these kinds of things. This concept, my suggestion, is to say, let's do this for all the ancestral villages of the Garifuna in Belize. Let's find a name. We know that they're historically very valuable to Belize. For example, Barranco is not only valuable to the Garifuna people of Belize, but it is valuable to the people of Belize, the country of Belize, right? So that needs a special designation. That will not only bring a special designation to Barranco, it will not only bring a special designation to the Garifuna people of Belize, but it will have two very important legal effects. Number one, what you're doing is ring fencing that village legally from any other competing force for land rights. We know that, I mean, it's no secret that the Maya land rights tenure is going to be ruled out. Government wants to roll it out this year. There are competing forces from Midway, neighboring village. This would essentially protect it based on its historical significance. That's number one, and the most urgent, I would say. Number two, it would attract funding. There would be access to funding through this development fund that we're advocating to start. Domestically, it would allow government then to earmark funds in the national budget, but also it would give villages like Barranco and other domestically designated historical villages a direct path to funding from all of these other international organizations, whether that be for environment, whether that be for culture, whether that be for whatever it is. So there's a whole plethora of other documents that I put together because these things, of course, will require subcommittees and people who will manage them from what I assume will be this group right here. That is the suggestion. That everything has a subcategory that will manage it. You have a concept, you have a plan for every village to establish this ancestral village designation in Belize. Well, first we have to find a name for it, but that's the concept. To go to government and say, here, this is what we want. And we're not just asking for it because we want it,